Hello, everyone. Welcome back to WorkTech. We've got some big breaking industry news today. Beamery, the talent lifecycle management platform, announced the acquisition of Flux, which is an emerging internal mobility platform. From my seat, this really adds to Beamery's vision of being a unified platform for both external and internal resourcing of talent. And we'll dig into that. It was such an interesting deal. I've been on the record so many times saying that until we marry the external and internal resourcing and recruitment in this world where we're trying, companies are struggling to retain employees in this great resignation, reset, whatever, until we marry those two sides. I'm not sure we're fixing the problem. So we've got that to talk about today, and we've got the best people to talk about this deal and about this issue. We've got the president of Beamery, Sultan Saidov, here, and Flux founder and CEO, Ionita. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, George. Excited to talk about this.
Yeah, me too. And for those in the audience that don't know Beamery or Flux, I'd love to start with a quick intro. Sultan, maybe you can lead us off, introduce yourself and tell us about Beamery, and then Nick, you can do the same for Flux.
Sure, thanks, George. I'm Sultan. I'm founder and president at Beamery, and I run the product and technology teams here at Beamery. And Beamery is for those of you who don't know us, the leading talent lifecycle management platform that started at its roots in 2014 as the first new generation, if you might say, of talent CRM and talent marketing offerings. We started with the core CRM at its root, powered by data enrichment, data intelligence, and creating a new ecosystem in the HCM and TA space of how to treat candidates in this proactive way. And then over time, layered that offering with new layers of talent intelligence, talent attraction, events, campus, career sites. And as we'll talk about today, in many ways, the final chapter of that evolution in bridging the TA and HR side of things by adding the employee experiences into our offering.
I'm Ionita, CEO and co-founder of Flux. We're an internal mobility platform, hence us being here, that connects employees to best fit work opportunities in their organization. So this could be full-time jobs, projects, rotations, flex time things, learning. I like to think of us like a career GPS that unlocks all the paths somebody could take and figure out how to take those steps to upskill or close the experience gap. So really focusing on, I think, what's been a key missing employee experience, but then ensuring that the business is both getting what it needs done now while it's building who it needs tomorrow.
Okay, thank you both for that. I'm really curious about this deal, how it came about, what you're both seeing in the market, what's happening that led to this deal. So I'll throw that out there for you two to field.
What hasn't been happening in this market. So the direction for this deal actually started a long time ago. In fact, in many ways from the outset, as I touched on earlier, for us, the vision of developing a mobility solution was there from the outset. We started Beamery on a mission to create equal access to work, and that requires the full gamut of being able to hire for potential in a capability-centric way, and then to develop that potential to take this end-to-end approach to the talent lifecycle. And for us, that strategy started by creating this new approach to a talent profile, this new approach to looking at CRM. But what has happened in the last couple of years is two things. One is an acceleration of the urgency of some of the problems in this space, which you touched on. And the other is a clearer picture of what a successful solution needs to look like, not just in terms of product. And you touched on it when you said the importance of combining TA and HR into a unified journey, but also in terms of change management. How do you actually deploy new approaches to mobility across the organization? What does it take to make gigs work? What does it take to actually take an organization from a point where recruiters aren't working with internal talent to ones where they are? And we've obviously had a lot more data in the last couple of years of where companies have been succeeding or failing. But for us, the genesis of the idea started actually with also lessons from our own customers. Despite our initial offering being TA and focused on CRM, from the first year of launching Beamery, we had customers using our solution that was intended for external candidates for building internal talent pools. That's a use case we've had from the get-go. And obviously we didn't optimize that for all of the employee experience side of things. But we had a lot of important learnings around how valuable firstly, allowing recruiters to tap into internal talent is, but also how important it is for TA tools to learn from employee data. One of the things that we've built at Beamery is what we refer to as dynamic AI that learns from what your employees look like, your employee profiles. How do we learn from your high performers in order to help your TA organization source better talent? How do we actually optimize the recommendations based on the skills of your employees and not just generic algorithms? But similarly, if you look at the what's been happening over the last couple of years in the market, this sort of need for more effective recruiting AI has also been added to by perhaps an even more important problem, which you touched on, which is employee retention. We've had businesses having to confront these questions of how do we actually look at the strategies and the levers we can pull to drive internal mobility and internal gigs and these other toolkits that might drive retention, but also starting to grapple with predictability. Companies don't know whether they're going to meet their hiring targets, their D&I targets. They don't know which employees they'll be able to keep. So other things within an organization, such as workforce planning, have started to have question marks around whether that process still works. Should it still be a sort of a once-a-year financial process, or is there a new type of more capability-driven workforce planning, one that's more dynamic, that has to take into account an understanding of our employee data? Where are we at risk? Where do we have opportunities to reskill, to upskill? So suddenly you have executives in businesses confronting these topics and HR and TA teams starting to work closer together to figure out how to answer these questions. And unsurprisingly, many companies have started to rush into the sort of evaluation and buying processes for what exists out there today. You know, talent marketplace solutions, existing mobility solutions, skill taxonomy development, new AI and matching products and things like that. And across the board, companies are running into major issues in deploying these tools. On the employee side in particular, a lot of companies are struggling with adoption and engagement. And before deciding to jump into how we want to approach this problem space, we wanted to really investigate what are the existing challenges in this space today. Obviously, there's a need, but what is causing these existing tools, programs to fail? And we found kind of two key reasons, especially in the last couple of years when this has been pressure tested at a much higher scale. And the first challenge that companies have been running into is with something you touched on, which is there's no effective connection to TA products and processes. And this has majorly hindered the efficacy of the employee programs designed around mobility, and whether it's gigs or full-time or otherwise. And I strongly agree with the points you've made about this. You've spoken about this before. You know, even with those products deployed, it's still harder for most employees to find a job internally versus applying externally. There's still a lot of friction. You actually have to go through the same process as an internal candidate, as an external candidate, but without the benefits of being considered by your recruiters or being proactively tapped for opportunities. And you don't get any benefit from everything your organization should know about you, your employee profile, the fact that you've already interviewed before, the fact that you should have a profile based on the work that you've done in that company. None of that gets taken into account. And so the first, generation of mobility products out there started to ask employees to build their profile from scratch. Like, what are your skills? As if that's a question any employee can reasonably answer in a vacuum. And the second reason that those existing products and approaches have struggled with adoption touches on this, which is what is the friction that we have, and how do you actually create effective engagement for employees? And just surfacing internal roles or internal gigs isn't enough to really activate employee engagement in these products. Employees have tons of products, whether it's in HR or otherwise, you're bombarded with tools and processes. So you really need to tap into the root of what makes employees want to take part in these programs, as well as what makes hiring managers want to create gigs or look internally, what makes other stakeholders engage. And the crux of this comes down to how to allow employees to look at this process as actually beneficial and engaging career development. How do we look at concepts like career pathing or mentoring, or even connecting our existing programs like L&D, which tend to be disconnected from your employee skills profile? You have to figure out how to bridge some of those frictions between the existing tools And the answer is it can't be a one-stop shop. You have to figure out the connective tissue between the existing ecosystem of things that touch career development, learning. And so we decided to explore this. We decided to look at not just the market problem and why this is important. Of course, it's important, but what would it actually take to solve these challenges in a way that existing tools and things out there haven't solved? And what would it take to deliver the sort of 1 + 1 = 3 benefits of combining TA and employee offerings into a solution that bridge those frictions? If you hired somebody, how do you continue the things that you've learned from the hiring process into their employee process? If you hire for potential, how do you actually then build on that potential rather than sort of starting from scratch in a different system with a lot of friction? And so we'd already had some of the problem solved through what we've been doing at Beamery for years. We built the first dynamic AI that looks at employee data, but we had a pretty big gap, which is in order to actually do this well, you need that engaging employee experience. And in fact, even for our TA offering, without the employee experience that is engaging and asks employees to look at their profile, learn from the gigs they do, you don't have enough data to actually make effective recommendations on build, borrow, buy, which candidates to hire based on your employees and so forth. So we did our own build, borrow, buy evaluation, but in the context of choosing how to deliver these capabilities to our customers. And we went through a pretty extensive process, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit more, to look at what's out there and are there solutions that would logically accelerate our path to be able to deliver the best experiences. And Flux came out by far on top on specifically those parameters of engaging employee experience and an experience that was built around skills-based development, not just in terms of jobs, but other components of mentor matching, validation of skills, integrating that into the existing ecosystem. We even had existing customers that were raving about Flux, existing joint customers, and were already asking about integration. So it became a no-brainer pretty quickly, especially after we met the founders, including Nick, who's here on the call. So it is sort of a perfect marriage of the market need is obvious, but actually the opportunity to do something that solves for this need is pretty unique and pretty nascent.
Yeah, that's there's a lot to unpack there, but I think what I'm really curious about is yeah, I don't know Flux, and I think while I'm aware that there's been traction in the market, most people watching this are probably wondering, well, what's the secret sauce? What gap does it fill, or what does it do on that experience bit better than others? So I'm curious about that. Maybe Nick, you're the best person to answer that at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take that. I think traditionally, really the problem we've aimed to solve was the employee experience one. So I think everyone here has been an employee at some point in time. And I almost think about recruiting as the sales process to get, employees into a company, but there's really not this customer success once they're there. And there's this irony that as organizations get bigger and there's more opportunity, a lot of that is actually harder to find. So a lot of what we started with was trying to solve that employee experience where, again, how do you become that GPS system and allow people to explore, right? Searching a job board's not a good mode if I don't know what something's called. And a lot of job board experiences are external. So kind of rather than starting by treating employees as a source for recruitment, we've started with, well, this is where you should go to find your next step. This could be a step forward that's obvious. It could be a way to close a gap. It could be to something I don't even know about yet. And we think about distribution and this crazy shared experience we've all had this last 2 years. If I'm hired somewhere where there's not even an office, how do we even know what's there, right? We have this line of sight challenge. So we very much focused on, if you can solve that, the employees engaged, we can use investments that have already been made by the HR team that are disconnected right now as tools to help those people navigate. You retain them, and in turn, the business also gets what it's needing, and we've got better data and experiences to work upon. So really, that's where we've centered this. It all starts with the employee, and through that, the business and everyone benefits.
Yeah, that's I'm really happy to hear you say that. I've been one of the few, critical voices around, just sort of ripping and replacing everything that's already been invested in. And it's really that experience layer, right? Of course, there are better learnings, management systems or experience systems today than there were 5 or 10 years ago. But why would we recreate that model when really the issue with it is experience and engagement? So sight unseen on your product, and I certainly trust Sultan's assessment, but I'm really happy to hear you say that. For me as an analyst, because I'm privy to Beamery's direction and vision over the last couple of years, this deal made so much sense to me, and understanding where you were headed, it was this internal piece that I understand why you consider that a gap. But most folks, another point where I think most folks watching this they might be saying, well, wait a minute, isn't Beamery a recruitment marketing platform? Isn't it, a CRM? And if you can bring everybody up to speed, and you've done some of that already, but sort of how you see Beamery moving forward and what this deal does in helping you achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start by highlighting that one of the key strategies we had from day one of forming Beamery is to help companies not reinvent everything. I think if you take the equivalent processes and the evolution of equivalent processes in the customer-facing organization, where, as Nick said, there's so many parallels in terms of how you can think about the customer success side of things versus the lead generation side of things. The world of customer experiences has been built around a people-centric methodology. You had your CRMs like Salesforce create the first app stores and ecosystems. One of the challenges we have in the world of recruiting and HR is that so many systems that we have today have been built around process and not people. And solving that doesn't mean just building a new one-stop shop. It means figuring out what a new ecosystem looks like. Mm-hmm. And we've been very deliberate about what we aren't doing and how we partner, just as much as we've been deliberate about what we are doing and what we're focusing on, because it's very important to allow companies to leverage the investments they've already made and complement those effectively, rather than trying to rip everything out and create sort of second-class offerings in certain areas. And so it's one of the reasons, for example, we have such unique and strong partnerships with the likes of Workday and SAP, and we have not tried to build an ATS, and we've not tried to build an HCM, and we've been very thoughtful around how do we actually allow companies to keep using those things for the core processes that they run, the core administration and things that run there, but how do we actually complement this with the emerging need in the market for strategic talent management? Because those process and core systems of process aren't designed for proactive experiences and people-centric experiences, but you can complement it with that. And I think for us, the vision started with how to do that in creating this new type of CRM that was powered through intelligent data, that was powered by learning from your processes and not just being sort of an online spreadsheet, that made recruitment marketing driven at its core through data that was cleaned, enriched, inferred with skills and capabilities and intent and seniorities, and that gave our first users, sources, recruiters, marketers, and folks running those programs an ability to leverage all of that existing data they had to, for example, retarget past applicants, not just source new ones. In fact, of the sort of million or so people that got hired directly through our system in the last year, more than half have come from rediscovery, people you didn't even need to source, previous applications. And so for us, that evolution of starting with how to create this new talent profile and what that looks like for a candidate and also a rejected candidate and also an alumni, somebody who leaves that company, it's always had this glaring gap of we don't have enough information about the employee. And part of the problem is that information doesn't actually exist. You can't integrate it from an existing system because existing systems on employees don't really track what skills your employees have. They don't really capture that. And so it requires more than just an integration into the ecosystem. It actually requires thinking about what type of experience would generate the type of information that makes this useful in order for us to actually not just deliver better experiences, but deliver better data to the company that says, well, here's the cases in your organization where you'd benefit from looking internally first before you jump to sourcing. And here's other cases where you have high risk based on your current of existing employee profiles, and you're going to need to either source or think about a new methodology for upskilling, reskilling, whatever it might be. And so for us, the evolution from kind of CRM to marketing to nurture naturally extends to this, especially because our AI has been built around this question of skills and capability centric intelligence. But one of the things that has also been a development on our side in especially the last couple of years is what type of intelligence you can give to customers based on learning from employee data. And this is something that hasn't really been possible until the last couple of years in terms of the AI models and the type of data available out there. And it's what we sometimes refer to as dynamic AI, which is how do we make not generic algorithms? How do we actually take into account the work that your organization is doing without you having to define everything up front? So Nick mentioned the idea of a GPS. If you want to provide effective career paths to employees or even external candidates, you can't rely on somebody manually managing that. You can't have a person in the HR organization keep saying, well, this job in product support is similar to this job in marketing. You have to have intelligence that does that, because it would be too much work at administration to figure that out. And now that we have the sort of toolkits on the Beamery side to make these intelligent predictions around, well, this role could go into this role and this career could be similar, it was a perfect timing for us to actually add the experience side of that, the equivalent of actually creating the Google Maps once you have the geo coordinates, and move that experience from one where people are looking at a map and feeling lost towards ones where people can chart their path. And we'd even started building that for external candidates before we made this this choice to acquire Flux and integrate these experiences. This was already solutions that we were building for the audience that we'd been serving, and of course naturally extends into completing this picture. As you say, this is kind of the last piece of the puzzle for us.
Yeah. Well, it makes so much sense from a product perspective, and I like that you're so much of what you're saying is, the employer keeps what's working, and this is additive. And there may be less of a need, there may be some replacement going on here, if depending on how they implement the solution. But we don't have to get into the debate about whether this should sit in talent acquisition or HR or both, because the capabilities are there to sort of align with the customer's approach is some of what I'm hearing. So that's good on you for that. So we've talked about the product, we talked about the market. What about your customers, each of you? What's the impact going to be, to a Beamery customer now that Flux is available?
Sure. Do you want to take that first, Nick?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with Flux. I mean, we can shift to Beamery with that. I mean, the nice thing is, we had a number of joint customers who are already kind of asking, we've got this thriving talent marketplace. How do we take all this data and engagement and actually give it to recruiters? So we were already kind of being pushed in this direction of, do you build a CRM? Can you connect to a CRM? We have Beamery. How does that work? So for a lot of our joint customers, the nice thing is we've already kind of started this work, and people can work in the system they need to, and the data and the experiences, traverse things the way they should. I think what it's doing for us is actually opening up more accessible internal mobility use cases. I think when people hear that word, they start thinking of gigs and things that may have a lot of change management involved. And at the simplest, it's simply answering, who's here who can do something, and can we do that in a fair, consistent way and put that data in recruiters' hands. So it's really allowing us to actually put that in customers' hands much earlier, make that much more accessible. And then you're just launching new things on top, which is a lot easier to iterate towards than trying to deploy a massive vision of change management on day one.
Yeah. What about Beamery's customers? So
it's similar points, but I think what's been interesting for us is we've had customers, as I mentioned, not only using us for internal talent pools, but asking us around what does the future hold? We have many Workday customers, SAP customers who have employee experiences. And one of the things we've been very thoughtful about is how to, again, complement those and how to make them very integrated, because it's very important to ensure that there is a clear delineation of how does an employee use one system versus another, how does the data connect? And so that's been a key consideration for us in how we've both thought about the acquisition, but also the integration of the systems, the data, the workflows. And I mentioned 1 + 1 = 3 earlier. There are so many areas where you end up with existing customers having a virtuous effect, even just from having the data, but also from the programs that allow the candidate experience to be continuous. You have a candidate that not goes through a hiring process which we power from lead to a talent portal, a profile. Now that they're an employee, that experience continues. It becomes a differentiator not only for how good the experience is, but how inclusive it is, because the key component of diversity, equity, and inclusion is about taking a capability-centric mindset, but also being able to show that transparency of this is how your career could develop. It uncomplicates so many processes that are currently very hard to get right. And I think for us, the ability to be able to launch this in this very frictionless way that doesn't require you to abandon or rebuild your existing taxonomies. We can integrate those through our products and connect that with this. The ability to take your existing programs for recruiting and open up these internal employee talent pools in such an effortless way, it just makes us a very fast value add and a very fast to market, which, and of course, even taking existing programs where we help companies look at, how effective is your hiring. Now we can look at what happens beyond the hire, how those employees grown. We can take all of our existing reports and make them a lot more useful and effective. So we're super excited. I think this is going to make a huge difference to our existing customers, and will hopefully pave the way for a different mindset to how to think about HR and TA collaborating moving forward, and how to think about this experience from candidate to employee to alumni being hopefully a new paradigm that others can follow.
Yeah, it's early days. I mean, you're making the announcement as this is hitting the internet. But are there any thoughts about whether this will be whether Flux will be optional, or will it be part of the platform? Or again, if you don't have those final decisions yet, that's totally understandable.
No, it's an important question, because for us, everything we do has a layer of being adapted to an individual organization. We're an enterprise software company, and things like this not only need to be optional in general, but even in terms of timing, depending on the maturity of your business and your priorities, it makes sense to start with mobility or to add that in once you've got core recruiting right. I think in general, we have a philosophy, a playbook around helping organizations create this sort of charter of, based on where we're at today, what is the right sequence? Certain things can add value from day one of just having the data, having these processes. Other things have to be a choice based on what works best for each organization.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer. Especially given, you do serve large enterprise, global, employers, a big part of your customer base. So what about, I always like to ask about employees, and it's not always an obvious answer. Are there opportunities that open up for existing Flux employees or Beamery employees, both? How does this impact employees?
I can take that one. I mean, we're kind of walking our walk here. The nice thing with this is this just fits so, I think, cleanly into the existing Beamery plan. So for us, we've got a US based engineering and product team. We're continuing to grow that. And then as we've been integrating products, there's plenty of opportunity, both in terms of how the products can work together that's already got teams cross-pollinating, to obviously what we can build on top of that, which there's plenty when you've got kind of the footprint on both sides of the fence now. So as we've been finding, there's plenty of opportunity. There's more than enough to build and sell. So everyone's pretty excited about it, and we've already been finding early opportunities to combine teams on things and allow people to move around and cross-pollinate, which has been really cool.
Yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense, and I know I've always been impressed with the Beamery team, and so I think you're in good hands there as far as challenges and opportunities and such. We lost Sultan, but that's okay. We're sort of wrapping up anyhow. We won't speak for him about the impact on Beamery employees, but he said 1 + 1 = 3. So that sounds like more opportunity, more challenge. Good challenge. And
we're actually running gigs inside the company right now, which has been a perfect way of having teams kind of work across each other right now, which is cool.
That's great. And I know there's a press release that's out. And how could folks go find out more about the deal, or about Flux, about Beamery, about what's happening here?
Yeah, absolutely. Beamery.com will be the right place to do that. We've got tons of information there already. Details on the deal and what this means for everyone will also be there, along with detail on kind of where to start and how all these things fit together.
Great. Well, I'll thank Sultan in his absence, and thank you, Nick, for being here, and both of you for being so transparent. I'll congratulate you again on the deal, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, George. Really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, and thanks to everyone for watching. And there's a lot more news coming. The market's still super hot, so stay tuned to WorkTech. And thanks all.